And we're back. This is the great classic rock debate. I'm Kenny,
Paul with zero qualifications.
And I'm Steve.
and we talk anything and everything classic rock. We try to keep it interesting, but we try to have fun. If you're watching right now, please like, comment, and subscribe. We will love you for that. Guys, one of the things that we've talked about, I mean, we're going on about 2 years now. One of the things we've talked about is because we're getting older, and when we were in our youth, the rock stars who we looked up to were 5, 10, 15, 20 years older than us. Those guys are, the yes, this you can stand the test of time and then no longer stand. So a lot of those guys are dying. And so we want to always at least take a moment or a few minutes just to pay tribute, especially the ones who have made notable contributions. And then to go even further, especially guys who may be a little less well known. However, when you look at their contribution, this guy deserves recognition for what he did. J.D. Souther is a perfect example of that. So we'll start with him tonight. J.D. Souther passed away 2 weeks ago, and last week it was Kris Kristofferson. So we'll talk about both. J.D. Souther was very contemporary with the Eagles. He was in the Southern California thing about the same time as them. I think they ran in the same circles. I think some of them hung out together and knew each other pretty well. Yep. And so he was probably more of a songwriter than recording artist, even though he did record several albums. Okay. Now I'm gonna start off with this particular thing simply because it represents, for anybody who has heard of him, then this is where they would have heard of him. In 1979, he released a single and an album, both titled When You're Only Lonely, okay? Or You're Only Lonely, I guess. And I had already heard of him at that time because I think I had heard interviews with probably the Eagles who talked about him and how they had collaborated with him on different songs, whatever. So I knew who he was. I don't think I knew what he looked like or whatever. He releases this album, and fellas, I was about 18. That song was an enormous hit, and it was on the charts for months. And in those days, they had a chart that was the adult contemporary. They probably still have that. Okay.
Yep.
But a term that did not yet really exist at that time, which has become a very common term now, and that's soft rock. Okay. And this song, in my opinion, is kind of the epitome of what soft rock is. When that term is used, or when you see a collection of CDs on TV, get the 10-disc CD collection of soft rock. That song is kind of the perfect example of what you're going to get in that collection. And for me, I thought it was a pretty good song. I have to say that it might not have aged great. I don't think it's aged bad, but in that moment, it was a big hit. And anyway, it came on the radio. I'd turn it up. And I think I even ended up buying the vinyl, the record. So anyway, that's our start. J.D. Souther passed away 2 weeks ago. I don't even know the cause of death. If you guys do, you can chime in. But 1979, big hit, You're Only Lonely. Okay.
Well, how old was he, by the way?
I'm going to have to pull it up. I've got his Wikipedia page open right here. Born in 45, so that would have made him
79.
Yes, correct. There you go.
It's fascinating. I have no idea of this person. I never heard of him. Steve knows I wasn't a big Eagles fan until maybe the last couple of years. I was starting to grow on me as I'm old.
Okay.
That was never my genre. I didn't care for it.
Right.
And these guys are magnificent, especially Joe Walsh. I worship at the altar of Joe Walsh. But the reason I ask his age, because it's fascinating to me, and this has nothing to do with music. Certain guys live, like Kristofferson, we'll get to, he was 88.
Yes.
And if you ever saw him, he's a little thin guy. He always looked good with his shirt off. Like, oh yeah. And you're like, and
we're gonna get to that. Trust me.
No, but I'm just saying, when you see other guys, like if you see pictures of and I love them, Keith Richards and these other people with their clothes off, they look freakish.
Right.
And you're like,
Yeah, there's
because
nothing attractive going on. Yeah.
there's drugs and they never worked out. And, and if you looked at Lemmy, if you don't keep yourself in shape and this happens to actresses and actors too. And I'm just like,
And Danzig.
and and people go through these phases of I just don't take care of themselves, and now this guy, I don't know, so 79, my mom's 79, but she's still alive. But I'm just saying, like, I'm amazed that some of these people have made it past 50 is what I'm trying to say. I didn't even say it right. But some of these people
like Keith Richards.
Yeah.
Keith Richards survived a nuclear war. Like
he is apparently going to outlive us all.
Right by it. Yeah. And like Iggy Pop, like I saw pictures of him, and they were in the newspaper in the 70s where he's in a gutter in Hollywood, and on the strip. Just that's Iggy Pop. He's passed out, gutter. And there's pictures of him.
They were just shooting Prince of Darkness. That's all they were doing.
But I'm just saying, I don't know.
Well, that was Alice Cooper.
Yeah,
Alice Cooper was the homeless guy. Sorry.
All right, Steve, your turn.
No, I've known about. Well, I've never met J.D. Souther, but obviously my first introduction to him was when I was younger, being an Eagles fan and being a huge Glenn Frey fan.
Right.
And I reading the liner notes, I noticed that some of these songs were written by or co-written by this guy named J.D. Souther. And I was like,
right.
What the heck is that? And so, as years go by, I realized like he was, I don't know if he was good friends with Don Henley and Glenn Frey, but learned that, they collaborated on a lot of stuff. And I'm assuming they were good friends because not only did he write a lot of stuff for the Eagles, like Best of My Love, Heartache Tonight, Sad Cafe, also wrote probably my favorite song from Don Henley, which was, and you may get into this, but the Heart of the Matter, which is probably my favorite solo song.
That's a great song. He also wrote songs with Dan Fogelberg, with Christopher Cross. I mean, lots of different artists. So he was pretty well known and well established.
I've only heard one, I think maybe two songs from J.D. Souther that he recorded himself, and I thought they were okay. He had an okay voice, nothing magnificent or unusual about it, but as far as a songwriter, he seemed to really nail kind of the contemporary easy
adult contemporary kind of thing. That was definitely his niche, no question. Now in 1981, James Taylor released an album, Dad Loves His Work, and I think it had been, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years, something like that, since he had released an album. So at the time it was released, there was a lot of hoopla. And the first single released from that album was called Her Town 2. And I think it's probably semi-autobiographical because it's about a guy and a girl getting divorced. And I assume Carly Simon was the woman he's describing in the song. But at the time it was released, the song was billed as a duet with James Taylor and J.D. Souther. Okay. So it probably got to about number 10 on the charts. But I think for most people who were James Taylor fans, the 70s stuff, the really well-known, I think they probably thought it didn't quite measure up to his earlier stuff. And for me, it was one of those songs that it wasn't until years later, I think I just stumbled on the video on YouTube or something, and I watched it and I was like, wow, that song is way better than I ever remember it. And watching the video, they're sitting on stools. It's the greatest thing. They're sitting on stools next to each other, playing guitar and singing, and kind of what you would picture, laid back atmosphere type of thing. And it's really good. And I said, man, I never disliked the song. I didn't think it was great, but then I heard it years later and I thought it was really good. So again, if you're not familiar with J.D. Souther, You're Only Lonely, and James Taylor, Her Town 2, a duet. Now, I want to add in this final little J.D. Souther anecdote, and I think this is great. Did you guys, either one, see the movie Always from 1989, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Richard Dreyfuss?
Yes. Had that big muscular guy in there. Good looking guy.
John Goodman?
Yeah, John Goodman was in
it. I know.
Okay. Steve, did you see it or not?
I've never seen it. There's a long inside joke that I have with people.
Paul, maybe I'm crazy, but I highly recommend it. I thought it was a really good movie. It's a romantic Yeah, it's a kind of a romantic comedy kind of thing, drama. But there's a scene in there where they're having some sort of I don't know if it's an engagement party or a dinner or something, but Richard Dreyfuss, who's his girlfriend? Holly Hunter, was it?
I think it. Oh my God, I think
yeah.
it is.
Yeah. And he says, now is that moment when the guy asks the girl to dance. And right as he's doing that, the music to the song Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, which was a 50 song, but there's a band there, and the band starts playing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. And the two of them start dancing. And I think she even says, oh, this is my favorite song. And as the song is playing, I'm going, I know that voice from somewhere. I've never heard this version of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, but I know that voice. And when they showed the band, I'm like, that's J.D. Souther. So J.D. Souther is known for You're Only Lonely, a duet with James Taylor, Her Town Too, and he's the singer of the band in the movie Always, which I highly recommend because it's a good movie and you'll like it. All right. That's all I have on J.D. Souther.
I was going to say, I think he also wrote, because I have Glenn Frey's solo record, a live record. It's from like the early 90s. I think
Smuggler's Blues?
No. What was the other big hit from Glenn Frey in the 80s? It was more of a ballad. The one that you love.
The One You Love. Great, good song.
I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, from that, he says this is a song that I co-wrote with J.D. Souther.
That would make sense.
That was the first time that I had heard. I was like, "Who's J.D. Souther?" And, internet didn't exist at that point. So,
is J.D. Souther related to J.D. Salinger?
They're cousins.
Not even spelled the same.
That's what I heard. And just for the record, he wrote or co-wrote "Best of My Love," "New Kid in Town," "Heartache Tonight," a bunch of other songs. So some really noteworthy songs.
Doolin Dalton, which is probably, you never hear that on the radio. And so if you like the Eagles and you've heard everything that's on the radio, go check out their second record. Now I can't remember the name of their second record. Desperado. And
yes.
And Doolin Dalton is on that, and it's a really good track.
Yep, I agree. Okay, we ready to go to Kris Kristofferson?
Go.
Okay, I'll start it like this. So you said he was what, 88 when he passed?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. So he's been around for a long time, and he's known as a songwriter. Most people probably know him as an actor because the guy was in about 5 million movies.
Coal Miner's Daughter.
Yeah, only a handful of movies that I would think of as that was a big success, a pretty well-known movie, a lot of unknown movies, but he's been in so many movies that most people would say, oh, I know who that is. He's an actor, but his start was as a singer-songwriter guy. Okay. Yeah. And my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, he was not a great singer. Okay. So that's just me, but he wrote, go ahead, Steve.
I will disagree. I mean, great. He had a very gravelly, raspy voice. And as a outlaw country, I don't like country music, but I love outlaw country. And as a member of the Highwaymen, he was fantastic. So
okay.
I will say that.
Okay, fair enough. That's very fair, as a matter of fact. So all I was going to say is he wrote the song "Me and Bobby McGee." Okay.
Yep.
Which Janis Joplin, I mean, it basically made her. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm bashing Janis Joplin, but almost everything she recorded was a cover version. All right. Yep. And so, but because she had such a rare voice, even if she took a cover version, she pretty much made it her own song. All right. So I had never even heard the Kris Kristofferson original. I had only heard hers. And then probably years after the fact, when I heard his, I said, okay, I see why that version was not a hit. Right? Again, vocally, he just can't deliver what she can do. And her version is timeless. No human being, yeah, exactly.
I do like it, but like you, I heard it years after the fact. And so it.
Right.
I generally like the version that I hear first.
Right.
With cover songs. It's just
and most people do. Yeah. So to his credit, he wrote Me and Bobby McGee. He wrote Sunday Morning Coming Down. That's a Johnny Cash song. Great song. You don't have to be a country music fan to like that song.
No, and almost Kris Kristofferson also recorded it, and so did Waylon Jennings. Probably almost every kind of 70s country artist probably recorded it at some
Okay.
point in their
All
career.
right.
So.
He also wrote For the Good Times, and he also wrote Help Me Make It Through the Night. And I can tell you, every one of those songs was #1 on the country charts. Only one of them, I think, me and Bobby McGee crossed over onto the pop charts, but they were all #1 country hits. So make no mistake about it. If he had done nothing more than write those 4 songs, he still would have lived out his life as a multi-gazillionaire. However, he did a lot of other things. And like I said, recorded his own albums and then became an actor and was in some pretty good movies. Now, fellas, what jumps out to you when you try to think of what was a good movie or a well-known movie, whatever, a box office smash that Kris Kristofferson was in? What's your first thought?
Blade.
Blade trilogy.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because as a kid growing up, I only knew him I knew of him as an actor first. It wasn't until
there you go.
I probably became a teenager. I was like, oh, that's the guy from the movies.
Right, right.
It is weird. Like the movie I liked him best in is a movie that bankrupted
Yes.
Heaven's Gate.
What's it?
Heaven's
MGM.
Gate.
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, bankrupted
MGM. Or United Artists. United Artists.
Yeah. So Heaven's Gate, if you guys haven't seen this movie, the version that I have, there's about 77,000 versions.
Okay, hold on. Let me interrupt. Hold on.
Right.
10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, you called me one day and said, have you ever seen this movie? And I said, no, I've heard of it, but I heard it was like terrible. And you said, it's not. It's pretty darn good. I'm bringing over the DVD and we're going to watch it. I said, I really didn't have a choice. But I admit, I was like, wow, that was pretty good. But it was 3 hours, which was a no-go back in those days.
And that was a Michael Cimino, who is fresh off of Deer Hunter. Won 4,000 Academy Awards. Great movie. It's not a happy movie.
Right. And can I add about Heaven's Gate? I know you're talking about Deer Hunter, but
no, I'm going back to Heaven's Gate. Go ahead.
Heaven's Gate has a fantastic soundtrack. It's westerny.
Yeah.
It's about Johnson County cattle war up in Wyoming.
That's correct.
In 1888 or roughly.
Now, did Kristofferson do any songs for the movie himself?
No, I mean it's a musical score.
No. I mean, I would just think you'd be natural. Hey, Kris, you want to sing on the? Sure.
I don't think there's any music with lyrics. I think it's all a musical instrumental. Sorry,
there's some shots in that movie that are mind blowing. Like they're in this giant hall and they're on skates, and the cameraman must be on skates, and the guy's skating in circles, and all these people. I'm like, oh my god, it must have taken them 3 weeks to get that shot, but they got it. But the movie, it bankrupted United Artists. It's long. The first cut was like, I think 6 hours, and they got it down to there's a whole book which I have about the making and how much money it lost, and it was like the pit. Like when you go into accounting and finance, like Steve and I do, there's a thing called sunk costs, and they had already spent $50 million, and they go, "We're going to need another $25 million." I'm just making an exaggeration. You're like, "Well, hold on. I'm going to throw $25 million after the first $50 million." Well, the first $50 million is a sunk cost. It's gone. No matter what happens, it's not coming back. So the theory is don't let that enter into your brain when you're making a decision. Next $25 million. So they kept doing this. I think the final cost was like $100 million in the 1980-81.
Right.
But the movie is just like Steve said. It's a telling of the Johnson County cattle wars. All these people, they were cattle barons, and they would shoot people on sight. And there was a horrible winter. And these people came from Russia and Hungary. They were all Eastern Europeans.
Eastern Europe. Yeah.
And Kris Kristofferson was this sheriff. He was awesome. And in the first scene of the movie, he graduates from Oxford.
Yep.
In England. He's very well educated, very rich. And he goes out in this middle of nowhere and he becomes the sheriff. And when these cattle barons start killing the locals, he takes the side of the locals and teaches them how to use these Roman 2,000-year-old techniques.
Right.
And they kick the crap out of these gunfighters.
I remember it. Yeah.
And it's based on a true story. I mean, the Johnson County cattle war actually happened.
Right. Awesome. So Kris Kristofferson, I love him for nothing else than doing that movie. Although he was in that movie with Payback with Mel Gibson.
Yes.
He's in
Well, I was
Big
going to
Top
say, for me, that was easily one of his best movies, because even though, that movie is a remake, right? Payback?
Which one?
Payback.
I
Isn't
think
it
it is.
a
I
remake?
think it
yeah,
is a
it's
remake.
been-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Hegelin did it.
Yeah. But man, that was a good underrated movie, because it never achieved the box office success that it should have. But we saw it at the movie theater and walked out going, man, that was fantastic.
That movie stole the ending from an episode of The Twilight Zone that had Martin Landau.
Oh, really?
So during the movie, I had seen that, but I think I know what's going to happen. And then at the end, you're like, yeah, it's just like violently cheering. But yeah, Kris Kristofferson, he played a lot of different roles. He was a bad guy, a good guy. He was
the first movie I remember seeing him in, I was a kid, like Big Top Pee-wee. He was in that. But his most famous role is probably From a Star is Born.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the one I was going to say. I was
Right
about
then.
15, and this movie was huge. And okay, at the age of 15, I'm pretty sure I didn't have a clue, like, what were the things that chicks were looking for in a guy. And when I kept hearing all the girls talk about how hot Kris Kristofferson was, I was like, what am I, in the Twilight Zone? Are you kidding me? I didn't get it. But Paul, you mentioned it earlier. When he took his shirt off, he was lean and he was in good shape. It turns out, I didn't know it at the time, he was like a special forces combat guy.
No, really?
Yep,
I did not know that.
He absolutely was. Yeah. Which made even more ironic by the fact that he's a peace tree hugging liberal. He's, oh my God. If you ever hear him being interviewed talking about his political views, run. Oh my God.
Well, we won't anymore.
Right.
But,
right.
Well,
right.
That is a little bit surprising, but maybe not, because what I have discovered about the difference between the old country guys, who are what I call country, and the new country with the guys wearing baseball hats, who are really, conservative. Like the old country guys from the 60s and 70s, they were more like rockers and had that. They would never be quote unquote conservative, because they were kind of rebelling against what was like the 50s sort of country. So they were all those songs were kind of like, they were about sex, drugs, and country.
Like Willie Nelson, right?
Yeah. And Johnny Cash too. Yeah.
But I like Kristofferson. He was a very versatile actor. I don't have anything against him. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
I would say, for those of you who are not that familiar with his country work, check out The Highwaymen. They did a couple of records with
I do like The Highwaymen.
Yeah.
Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Kris Kristofferson. And they have they did a live concert. I have the DVD. It's phenomenal. If you kind of like country rock, check it out.
Okay. One final thought on A Star is Born. I did not see that movie until about, I don't know, less than 10 years ago. I saw it around the time that the Lady Gaga Bradley Cooper version came out. So whatever year that was, I don't know.
Right, 2018, 2017.
Something like
That's
that, right? And the reason why is because I know that movie's been remade 3 or 4 times.
At least.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had never seen any of them. So I said, well, you know what? I remember as a teenager how big this whole Kris Kristofferson thing was. So I downloaded it and watched it. And I got to tell you, it was god awful. It was awful. It was. So I never saw any of the other versions. I saw just that one. I'm not saying that, I'm not attacking Kris Kristofferson. That movie is terrible. It's downright
Is it because
terrible.
Barbra Streisand's in it?
She is. And yeah, she makes it terrible also. The plot line is so utterly imbecilic. I just can't. Look, I realize that there's got to be some, what do they call it? Where you, suspension of disbelief.
Suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, but this is, remember now, he's a classic rocker dude who just can't do it anymore. And Barbra Streisand walks on stage when he walks off, and she starts singing her Barbra Streisand songs, and the classic rock crowd embraces her and loves her. And I'm like, in what Twilight Zone universe does that happen? the hard rock audience embraces the soft pop adult contemporary singer. It's just dumb.
I didn't realize he was a hard rock guy in that. I've never
In the
seen
movie.
Yeah,
he's like a classic rocker.
Okay.
And he's also a guy who's aging, so he's kind of grown tired of it. He doesn't want to keep doing it. He's tired of it. Yeah. Okay, fellas, we got our warning. So what I'd like to do is shift on over. Steve saw Electric Light Orchestra live in concert a couple of nights back, and I'd like to hear all about that. And another band that we grew up on, right? And I assume they've been through some personnel changes, but man, those guys made their contribution and then some to the music universe and to classic rock. So, Steve, I'm turning the floor over to you. Tell us about the concert.
All right. First of all, great show. For those of you who are expecting the full orchestra, they are there, but it really is just it's called Jeff Lynne's ELO.
Okay.
I don't know what happened with the other band members. I will say that I think it's Richard Tandy. Is that his name? Who was the keyboard player? He passed away recently, just a couple of months ago. But he was kind of the other driving force behind Electric Light Orchestra. But really, most people they know Jeff Lynne, they know his voice, they recognize him. He basically wrote most of the songs. So it really is Jeff Lynne. He had a backup band of 12 people. So a couple of keyboard players, guitar players, had 2 cellists and a violin, bass player and percussion and all that stuff. So great show. He's got to be probably close to 80. I mean, late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, yeah.
I've said this the last couple of acts I've seen, which were the Stones, and I saw Ringo last year as well. These guys, they're billing it as the Over and Out tour. So he's done touring after this. So, but they are better at their age than 99% of the bands that are half their age. And I don't know what it is. I mean, Electric Light Orchestra, they put on such a great show just from a stage presence. They have the whole spaceship, and then in the middle of the spaceship, in the middle of the ring, that's where their movie projection is. And just they put on a great show. They sound great live. I mean, they have the orchestra. Now, his voice, he's obviously not at the top of his game, but again, he's, close to 80 years old. He can still hit almost every note. Some nights I've seen some of his shows on YouTube. Some performances are better than others. Last night here in Denver was particularly good. They played for about an hour and 45 minutes. They played all the hits. I was lucky enough to get tickets in the 10th row, right at center stage. And I did it intentionally because they're one of my favorite bands of all time. And they're just so unique. There's nobody else out there like them. I don't know if there ever will be that, has the ability to rock with things like Do Ya and that song Rockaria and
Evil Woman.
Yeah, Evil Woman and Roll Over Beethoven.
Right.
And then they'll play some of the softer songs like Telephone Line.
Telephone Line, yeah.
The show was pretty much sold out. It was in the Pepsi Center, which holds like 18,000 people for hockey games or whatever.
Yeah.
There were a few empty seats way in the back, but for the most, I would say it's probably 95% sold out, but just really good. I mean, I'm going to run through the set list one more time, real quick. And they opened with One More Time, Evil Woman, Do Ya, Showdown. Again, those are 2 of my favorite tracks from them.
Right.
Believe Me Now, Steppin' Out, Last Train to London, Rockaria, 10-5-38 Overture. I never know if that's supposed to be a year or whatever, but
yeah.
Strange Magic,
good song.
Sweet Talking Woman,
good.
Can't Get It Out of My Head, which has been that's one of my favorite all time from them.
And it's Fire on High,
Velvet Revolver. What's that, Paul?
Fire on High.
And so I'll get to that. So next song, Fire on High. I've never seen them play that live. And they played, it's an all instrumental. And the woman that was the violin, oh man, she was on fire. The violinist played that. And it was kind of a medley. They only played about the first half of it, maybe the first 2 minutes, and went right into Living Thing. Because, Living Thing, it starts with the violin.
Right. Yep.
Intro. Right. So they kind of went right into that. All Over the World, which is more of a pop kind of song, but I still enjoy it.
It was 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, the bulk of their well-known songs were in the 70s, and they still recorded a few more hits in the 80s. I think largely those didn't quite compare to the better
Correct.
stuff in the 70s. Yeah.
Now they have some good stuff from the 80s. If you're not familiar with it, Calling America, which was, I think, the last ELO record from the 80s
I
that was
remember
put out under the Electric Light Orchestra, full name.
Okay.
It was a couple of years before the Traveling Wilburys. And
Okay.
then last couple songs, I think I said Telephone Line, All Over the World, Turn to Stone, which is more of a disco, but I mean,
Right.
I really enjoyed
Great
it.
song.
Shine a
Yeah.
Little Love, Don't Bring Me Down, and then the encore was Mr. Blue Sky. So 20 songs, an hour and 45-minute show, and I paid quite a bit of money for the tickets, but again, my favorite band, knowing that this is probably the last time I'm ever going to get a chance to see
Okay.
them.
Let me just
Very
say
happy.
this. Let me just say this. Based upon the set list that you just read off, if you're an ELO fan, you couldn't have asked for a better concert. I mean, every good song of theirs that I've ever known, you named.
Yeah, and they have
Wow.
more hits than that, but I mean, there wasn't. I did not sit down once, and neither did anybody else. I mean, it was pretty impressive. I was probably still on the younger side, but there were a handful of kids probably in their teenagers and
Okay.
early 20s. So I was like, well, at least there's hope for the future there.
Right. Right.
Um, but definitely an older crowd, but still,
Sure. Yeah.
everybody was singing the entire show. I mean, it was pretty amazing when you can go to a concert and everybody knows the words to every
Yeah.
song.
Hey, what
It's
about Mr. Blue Sky? Was that one? Was that on
Yeah,
there?
that's what they closed with.
Encore.
Oh,
That
okay.
was the
Okay. Okay.
encore.
Because that was in that opening scene of Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And
Yeah,
that's a
and there
pretty
were
cool scene.
exactly, and there were several people there, older, like guys in their 70s, who had like Groot figures, and they were like throwing them around because of Guardians of the
Right.
Galaxy.
Right.
And I
Right.
was like, I had forgotten that song was in that movie, and
Right.
I was like, why do you have that? He's like, oh, don't you remember from the Guardians of the Galaxy? I'm like,
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
everybody seemed to enjoy it. If they're coming to your town, highly recommend it. If you like Electric Light Orchestra, I've never met anybody who doesn't like them.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge fan, so I've just always appreciated just the various different instruments. And Jeff Lynne, one of my favorite singers. I love his voice, and great show. So highly
Okay.
recommend.
Good. Sounds great. Okay, we're coming right down to it. So if you guys have any final thoughts, let's go ahead and share those, and then we're going to wrap it up.
All right. I saw Megadeth last Saturday night. Very good. Mudvayne opened for them. I'm not a big Mudvayne fan. My buddy was a big Mudvayne fan, but man, Megadeth. I mean, he's got to be damn near 65. He's the same age as Metallica. I don't know how those
Yeah,
guys are
they're
now.
gonna be close to about 60 years old because Metallica's first record was what, 82, maybe 83 with Kill 'Em All.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
in that band
83.
prior to that being released. So,
Yeah. So he's got to be, yeah. So really great concert. They're like a band that's super tight. Like you could tell they practice and practice and practice, unlike the Miami Dolphins. Um, yeah, it was enjoyable. He played a lot of his hits. Some songs off his newer stuff. We talked about this where bands have a trouble, right? Everyone wants to hear Hangar 18. Everyone wants to hear Sweating Bullets, these kind of songs. But then he's got new stuff. Steve and I were at UCF Film School when Sweating Bullets came out. That was in 96 or 95,
that
97.
song came out like in 92 because I was in high school.
Yeah, so in 92, that was almost 30 years ago. Or it is 30 years ago. It's scary.
More than 32. Yeah. I don't mind when they play some of the newer stuff. I know a
I
lot
don't
of
either.
people. I want them to play newer stuff. I want to see stuff from every era. And it bothers me that people who claim to be fans, who pay a lot of money to go to these shows, who are older than me, when they do play some of the newer stuff, they'll leave and go get a beer or whatever, or go to the restroom. And I'm like, man, if you're a real fan, you should be following these guys because some of them are still putting out good music. And even Jeff Lynne's put out a couple of records in the last 10 years. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
in general, I guess my comment would be if there are bands